In many high-security prison systems, the most restrictive housing units are designed to remove nearly all forms of human contact. These units are often referred to as administrative segregation, special housing, or solitary confinement. The terminology varies across jurisdictions, but the conditions are largely consistent. Individuals are confined to a cell for approximately 22 to 24 hours a day. Movement is tightly scheduled and controlled. Contact with others is limited, often indirect. The architecture reflects this purpose. Cells are typically constructed of reinforced concrete and steel. Doors are solid, with only narrow slots for food delivery and restraints. Windows, if present, are small and often frosted or positioned to prevent any meaningful view outside. Lighting is artificial and frequently remains on for extended periods, sometimes continuously. These conditions are not theoretical. Reports from oversight bodies, including departments of corrections and independent inspectors, have documented these environments in detail. In the United States, for example, federal and state reviews have consistently described segregation units as spaces of prolonged isolation, minimal stimulation, and strict routine control. The purpose of these units is administrative as much as punitive. They are used to house individuals considered a threat to institutional safety. This includes those with a history of violence, escape attempts, or leadership roles within prison gangs. Placement decisions are typically based on documented behavior, intelligence reports, and internal risk assessments. Within these units, control is absolute. Meals are passed through a slot in the door. Movement, when permitted, is conducted under restraints. Recreation, if offered, often takes place alone in a separate enclosed area. Communication with staff is brief and procedural. Interaction with other incarcerated individuals is limited to what can be heard through walls or ventilation systems. Research has examined the psychological effects of these conditions. Studies published in peer-reviewed journals and findings from organizations such as the National Institute of Justice and the American Psychological Association have identified consistent patterns. Individuals in prolonged isolation may experience anxiety, cognitive disruption, perceptual distortions, and difficulty concentrating. Sleep disturbances are also commonly reported. These effects are not uniform, but they are documented across multiple populations and settings. Some individuals adapt to the routine. Adaptation does not mean comfort. It refers to the development of coping mechanisms within a constrained environment. These can include strict personal schedules, physical exercise within the cell, or engagement with reading materials when available. In some cases, religious practice becomes a structured part of daily life, supported by documented access to texts and limited chaplain services. For others, the conditions intensify pre-existing mental health issues. Correctional systems have acknowledged this challenge. Official reports have noted that individuals with serious mental illness may deteriorate in isolation, leading to policy debates and, in some jurisdictions, reforms limiting the use of solitary confinement for vulnerable populations. Despite these concerns, segregation units remain a central feature of prison management. They serve a specific function, separating individuals who are believed to exert influence or pose risk within the general population. This influence is not always visible. Within the broader prison environment, gangs operate through structured hierarchies. Law enforcement and correctional intelligence units have documented the existence of organized groups with defined leadership, rules, and communication systems. These groups often extend beyond a single facility, maintaining connections across multiple prisons and, in some cases, into the outside community. Leadership within these groups is not dependent on physical proximity. Investigations and court records have shown that individuals placed in isolation can continue to exert influence. This occurs through indirect communication methods that are difficult to fully eliminate. These methods may include coded messages, legal correspondence, or interactions during controlled movements. Correctional staff are trained to monitor and intercept such communication. Intelligence gathering within prisons is a continuous process. It involves reviewing written materials, tracking associations, and analyzing patterns of behavior. Specialized units are responsible for identifying gang affiliations and assessing the level of threat posed by specific individuals. Even within highly restrictive settings, complete control is difficult to achieve. This is not a failure of design, but a reflection of the complexity of human systems. Prisons are closed environments, but they are not static. Information moves, relationships persist, and influence can adapt to constraints. The individuals placed in these units are often those identified as central to these dynamics. Their removal from the general population is intended to disrupt networks and reduce the potential for coordinated activity. In many cases, this strategy is effective in limiting direct interaction and visible organization. But the absence of visibility does not always mean the absence of control. Documented cases have shown that leadership structures can persist despite physical separation. Court proceedings involving organized prison groups have included evidence of directives issued from segregation units. These directives are often transmitted through intermediaries, using methods that comply with or exploit existing regulations. This creates an ongoing challenge for prison administrations. They must balance the need for security with the limitations of confinement. Increasing restrictions can reduce certain risks, but may also create new pressures within the system. Decreasing restrictions can improve conditions, but may allow greater opportunity for coordination. There is no single solution that fully resolves this tension. Instead, institutions operate within a framework of continuous adjustment. Policies are revised, technologies are introduced, and staff training evolves in response to emerging patterns. What remains consistent is the environment itself. A confined space, controlled light, limited sound, structured time. Within this setting, individuals identified as the most influential and potentially dangerous are held apart. Not removed from the system, but contained within it. This is considered a basic component of prison operations and in many countries, is protected under legal frameworks that recognize the importance of maintaining external contact. The process is structured. Mail is collected, logged, and inspected. In non-privileged correspondence, staff are authorized to read content. Legal mail, typically defined as communication with attorneys or courts, is handled under stricter confidentiality rules, though it may still be screened for physical contraband in the presence of the recipient. These procedures are documented in departmental policies and have been examined in court rulings concerning prisoners' rights and institutional security. Within this system, communication becomes both monitored and adaptable. Investigations conducted by correctional intelligence units and law enforcement agencies have identified methods through which individuals attempt to pass information indirectly. These methods do not rely on overt statements. Instead, they may involve coded language, altered phrasing, or references that carry specific meaning within a defined group. Court records from cases involving organized prison gangs have included examples of such communication. In these cases, prosecutors have presented letters and recorded messages as evidence, demonstrating how instructions were conveyed without explicit language. The interpretation of these communications often relies on corroborating evidence, including testimony from cooperating witnesses or analysis by trained investigators. This form of communication does not require frequent contact. A single message, if understood within an established structure, can carry operational significance. Leadership roles within prison gangs are often defined by continuity rather than constant interaction. Instructions may be issued intermittently, with expectations that they will be followed according to pre-existing rules. These rules are not informal. Research into prison gangs, including studies published in criminology and sociology journals, has documented the presence of organized codes of conduct. These codes can include expectations regarding loyalty, discipline, and response to perceived violations. They are maintained through a combination of internal enforcement and reputation. Reputation plays a central role. Within the constraints of incarceration, an individual's influence is often tied to documented history. This includes prior behavior, known affiliations, and established authority within a group. Correctional intelligence reports frequently reference these factors when assessing risk and determining housing placement. In segregation units, where direct contact is limited, reputation can persist without reinforcement through daily interaction. This persistence is supported by the structure of the institution itself. Transfers between facilities, shared legal networks, and overlapping periods of incarceration create continuity. Individuals who have operated within the same system may carry knowledge of organizational hierarchies across different locations. This allows communication, when it occurs, to be understood within a broader context. Correctional staff are aware of these dynamics. Training programs for officers and investigators include instruction on identifying gang affiliations and recognizing potential indicators of coordinated activity. This may involve monitoring patterns in correspondence, tracking associations during permitted movements, and maintaining databases of known group members. Technology has expanded these capabilities. Many prison systems now use digital tools to scan and archive correspondence. Some facilities have implemented systems where physical mail is converted into electronic format, allowing for centralized review and analysis. Phone calls, where permitted, are often recorded and subject to keyword monitoring. These measures are designed to increase visibility. However, they do not eliminate the underlying challenge. Communication within prisons operates within constraints, but it is not entirely preventable. The balance between security and lawful access to communication creates a space where controlled exchange continues. In documented cases, this space has been used to maintain organizational structure. For example, federal prosecutions in the United States involving groups such as the Aryan Brotherhood and other prison-based organizations have included evidence showing that directives were transmitted from incarcerated leaders. These cases rely on extensive investigation, often combining intercepted communication with informant testimony and surveillance data. The outcomes of such cases have influenced policy. They have led to the development of specialized units focused on managing individuals identified as high-risk communicators. In some systems, this has resulted in further restrictions, including limitations on correspondence or increased monitoring protocols. At the same time, legal standards impose boundaries. Courts have consistently held that restrictions on communication must be justified by legitimate security concerns. This creates a framework in which prison administrations must demonstrate that their policies are necessary and proportionate. Within this framework, communication remains a regulated but persistent element of prison life. For individuals identified as leaders within organized groups, it represents a means of maintaining relevance despite physical separation. The ability to send a message, however limited, can sustain a connection to a broader network. This connection is not constant. It is intermittent, controlled, and subject to interruption. But it exists within the system, shaped by policy, monitored by staff, and, in some cases, used to extend influence beyond the confines of a single cell. The corridor remains quiet. Doors stay closed. The exchange of information continues, often unseen, within the boundaries of institutional control. Inside the general population of high-security prisons, order is not maintained by architecture alone. Movement is structured. Schedules are fixed. Staff presence is constant. But within these controlled environments, social organization continues to develop among incarcerated individuals. This organization is not random. Decades of criminological research and correctional intelligence reports have documented the formation of prison gangs with defined hierarchies. These groups often emerge along lines of geography, race, or shared background, though their structure and scope vary across institutions. The hierarchy within these groups is deliberate. Leadership positions are typically based on a combination of seniority, documented history, and demonstrated adherence to group rules. Academic studies and law enforcement investigations have identified consistent patterns in how these roles are assigned and maintained. At the top are individuals recognized as decision makers. They may not be physically present in the same unit as other members. In many cases, they are housed in segregation due to their classification as high risk. Their absence from daily interaction does not necessarily remove them from the organizational structure. Below them are intermediaries. These individuals operate within the general population. Their role is to interpret, relay, and implement directives. They may also be responsible for maintaining discipline within the group, ensuring that expectations are followed, and addressing violations according to established codes. These codes are not informal agreements. Documented evidence from court cases and correctional reports has shown that many prison gangs maintain written or memorized rules governing behavior. These rules can include restrictions on association, requirements for loyalty, and prescribed responses to conflict. Enforcement is a central component. Failure to comply with group expectations can result in internal sanctions. These have been documented in investigative reports and, in some cases, in testimony presented during criminal proceedings. The presence of enforcement mechanisms reinforces the authority of leadership, even when that leadership is not physically present. This structure allows continuity. Individuals may be transferred between facilities or placed in restrictive housing, but the organizational framework persists. Research has shown that prison gangs often operate as decentralized networks, with roles that can be filled by different individuals over time while maintaining overall cohesion. Communication supports this structure, but it is not the only factor. Shared understanding of rules and hierarchy enables members to act without constant instruction. In this sense, control is maintained through expectation as much as through direct orders. The system relies on internalization of group norms. Correctional institutions monitor these dynamics closely. Intelligence units track affiliations, document interactions, and analyze patterns of behavior. This information is used to inform housing decisions, identify potential conflicts, and disrupt organized activity when possible. Despite these efforts, the presence of structured groups remains a consistent feature of many prison systems. This persistence is linked to the environment itself. Prisons are controlled settings where autonomy is limited. Within these constraints, individuals may seek stability, protection, or identity through association with others. Studies in correctional sociology have noted that group affiliation can provide a sense of order in an otherwise restrictive context. This does not reduce the risks associated with these groups. Law enforcement agencies have documented the involvement of prison gangs in coordinated activity both, and in some cases, outside correctional facilities. These activities have been the subject of federal and state prosecutions, supported by extensive investigative work. The organizational model contributes to this capacity. By distributing roles and maintaining hierarchy across different locations, these groups can function despite the physical separation of key individuals. Leadership does not require constant visibility. It relies on recognition and continuity. Within the dayroom, this structure is not immediately visible. Individuals sit, move, and interact within the boundaries set by the institution. Conversations are brief. Movements are measured. The presence of staff influences behavior at all times. But beneath this surface, patterns exist. Who sits with whom? Who avoids contact? Who moves first? These patterns are observed and recorded by correctional staff as part of ongoing intelligence efforts. They reflect an underlying organization that operates within, and sometimes in tension with, the formal structure of the prison. The distance between individuals in the room is physical. The connections between them are not always visible. Hierarchy, once established, does not depend on proximity. It is maintained through recognition, reinforced through behavior, and sustained by a system that continues to function even when its central figures are no longer present in the same space. Within correctional systems, the management of organized inmate groups is not left to observation alone. It is structured through intelligence. Most medium and high-security prison systems maintain specialized units tasked with identifying, monitoring, and responding to group activity. These units operate within the broader framework of institutional security, using documented information to guide decisions about housing, movement, and restriction. Their work is continuous. Information is collected from multiple sources. Incident reports filed by correctional officers provide initial documentation of behavior. These reports are supplemented by recorded communications, confiscated materials, and in some cases, debriefings from individuals who choose to provide information about group activity. Each piece of information is evaluated. Verification is a critical step. Intelligence staff are trained to distinguish between rumor, exaggeration, and actionable data. This process often involves cross-referencing multiple reports, reviewing historical records, and identifying patterns over time. The objective is not only to understand what has happened, but to anticipate what may occur. This anticipatory function shapes how institutions respond to individuals identified as influential within prison gangs. Classification systems assign levels of risk based on documented behavior, known affiliations, and involvement in prior incidents. These classifications are reviewed periodically and can change as new information becomes available. Placement decisions follow. Individuals assessed as high risk are often assigned to more restrictive housing. This may include segregation units designed to limit contact and reduce the opportunity for coordination. The decision to place someone in such conditions is typically subject to internal review processes, which may involve multiple levels of approval. These processes are documented in departmental policies and, in some jurisdictions, subject to external oversight. Oversight bodies, including inspectors general and independent review boards, have examined how intelligence is gathered and used within prisons. Their reports have highlighted both the necessity of these systems and the challenges associated with maintaining accuracy and fairness. Errors can occur. Misidentification of group affiliation, reliance on unverified information, or outdated records can influence decisions. Correctional systems have implemented procedures intended to reduce these risks, including periodic reviews and opportunities for individuals to challenge their classification. At the same time, the need for security remains central. Organized group activity has been linked, in documented cases, to violence facilities, including assaults and coordinated disturbances. Intelligence units are tasked with identifying indicators that may precede such events. These indicators can include changes in communication patterns, shifts in association, or the emergence of new leadership structures. Technology plays an increasing role in this process. Digital databases allow institutions to store and analyze large volumes of information. Communication monitoring systems can flag keywords or patterns for review. Surveillance cameras provide continuous visual records of movement within common areas. These tools expand the capacity for observation. They do not eliminate uncertainty. Human behavior within constrained environments can be difficult to predict. Individuals may adapt their actions to avoid detection, altering communication methods or limiting visible association. Intelligence work, as a result, remains interpretive as well as procedural. Within this context, containment is both physical and informational. Restrictive housing limits direct interaction. Monitoring systems track communication. Classification frameworks define levels of risk. Together, these elements form a layered approach to managing individuals identified as central to organized activity. This approach is not static. Policies are revised in response to legal decisions, research findings, and operational experience. For example, litigation. The use of prolonged solitary confinement has led some jurisdictions to adjust their practices, introducing limits or additional review requirements. These changes reflect an ongoing effort to balance security with legal and ethical considerations. Despite these adjustments, the core function of intelligence units remains consistent. They seek to understand structure within the inmate population. This structure is not always visible in daily routines. It exists in patterns that emerge over time, in connections that persist across locations, and in behaviors that signal affiliation or authority. By mapping these patterns, institutions attempt to disrupt them. Separation of key individuals is one method. Monitoring communication is another. In some cases, coordinated transfers are used to prevent the consolidation of group members within a single facility. Each measure is designed to reduce the capacity for organized control. But control, as documented in multiple investigations and court proceedings, can adapt. It can shift from direct instruction to indirect influence. It can rely on established expectations rather than constant communication. It can persist through recognition of authority, even when that authority is physically removed from the general population. The Intelligence Office reflects this ongoing effort to keep pace. Screens display data. Reports are reviewed. Decisions are recorded. Outside this room, the institution continues to operate under structured routine. Inside, the focus remains on understanding how influence moves within a system designed to contain it. In the public imagination, control inside prison is often reduced to visible force. Steel doors, locked units, armed supervision, restrictive housing. But the reality documented by correctional research, official reports, and court proceedings is more complex. Control is rarely exercised through violence alone. It is maintained through systems, hierarchy, routine, reputation, restriction, and time. The most violent inmates who come to influence prison gangs do not necessarily do so because they are physically stronger than everyone around them. Research on prison gangs and inmate leadership has consistently shown that authority inside prison is often built on survival, continuity, and the ability to function within extreme institutional pressure. Influence grows in places where autonomy has been stripped away. Inside prisons, nearly every aspect of daily life is regulated: when to wake, when to move, when to eat, when to speak, when to wait. Within that structure, organized groups emerge as parallel systems of order. Sometimes they provide protection. Sometimes they enforce discipline. Sometimes they become instruments of fear. Studies of prison gang organization show that these groups often fill governance gaps created by overcrowding, understaffing, and the instability of inmate populations. This is where influence becomes durable. Not because a single person commands every action, but because the rules outlive the individual. A leader can be removed from the yard, transferred across states, or placed in long-term segregation. Yet the structure can remain intact. Expectations persist. Affiliations remain. Codes continue to be followed. Modern research has challenged the older image of prison gangs as simple, rigid pyramids. The reality is often more fragmented and adaptive. Groups change shape depending on the institution, the staff-to-inmate ratio, the level of violence, and the restrictions imposed by prison administrators. And so the system responds. Intelligence units collect reports. Communications are monitored. Movement is restricted. Segregation is used as a management tool. For decades, Prison systems have relied on extended isolation to contain individuals considered the most dangerous or influential. Official reviews and justice studies document how restrictive housing has been used to separate gang leaders from the general population. But even here, the evidence remains unsettled. Some reports have found little clear evidence that prolonged solitary confinement significantly reduces institutional violence over the long term. The prison adapts. The gangs adapt. The people inside adapt. This is the central reality of incarceration at its most restrictive. No system remains static. Every measure of control creates a counter-response. Every restriction reshapes behavior. Every separation produces new forms of connection. For those who spend years or decades inside, survival itself becomes a form of discipline. Routine replaces time. Silence replaces speech. Reputation replaces presence. And influence, once established, can continue even in absence. This is not a story of spectacle. It is a documented reality of institutional life. A place where control is constantly contested, not only between staff and inmates, but within the inmate population itself. The walls remain fixed. The doors remain locked. The routines repeat. Morning count, meal slot, movement, lockdown, night count, again, and again, and again. The prison does not end when the corridor goes quiet. It continues in paperwork, classification files, intelligence reports, disciplinary hearings, transfer orders, and the long psychological afterlife of confinement itself. What remains most unsettling is not the violence alone. It is the permanence of the system that contains it. The way structure reproduces itself. The way power survives separation. The way confinement changes the people inside it, and sometimes continues to shape them long after release. For some, prison is measured in years. For others, it is measured in routines that never fully disappear. And in the silence of an empty corridor, under fluorescent light that never fully goes dark, that reality remains. Quiet. Documented. Unfinished. If this documentary helped deepen your understanding of the realities inside prison systems, share your thoughts and reflections in the comments. If you found the reporting valuable, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more fact-based investigative prison documentaries grounded in documented reality.